Jay, I remember when I was a kid working at the tackle store in Southern California, and everybody that came into the shop, I mean, we're talking Chuck English, we're talking Doty, all the big guys in Southern California were coming into the shop, and they'd go over to the Colorado River and fish Operation Bass tournaments, the Redman circuit, and they'd come home, and you know, it just all of a sudden it was like a light switch. All of a sudden they were coming in with droopy faces. You know, some new kids moved in, sleeping out of his van, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and taking all of their money. And it turns out, you know, find out a couple months later, it's this new kid, Jay Yelas. You know, can you tell us about that?
I've got. I don't remember the exact sequence of all that, but I remember in general terms, that was definitely a hot streak. I graduated from Oregon State in like June of '87, so I went straight to Lake Mead to pre-fish for the U.S. Open that summer in '87, and it was my first pro tournament out of college. I remember I went down there and I led it the very first day, so that was a good start. Ended up sixth. Larry Hopper won that. He won it with, it was like the toughest Open ever. I think it was 23 pounds. 23 pounds, won a 4-day event. But anyway, so that was that, and then that fall, I just started fishing. I remember I was just out of college, and I just had an old white Chevy van, and I just had to put a bed in the back of it on a mattress and had some tackle on some shelves. And I'd go out in that thing, and I'd just camp out at Lake Mead and Lake Powell and Roosevelt, all those lakes down there, and I'd just fish every day. And I'd come in and sleep in my van, eat peanut butter and jelly, go fish all the next day, and literally the only time I wasn't fishing was when I was driving to another lake, or if I needed some service work on my boat or my motor. I was just totally focused. Hadn't met Jill yet. I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to approach bass fishing like it's an Olympic sport, and I'm just going to train for it like I'm training for the Olympics. You know, just totally focused. And so that's what I did. And I remember the next couple of years, that was just an amazing run. I remember, you know, the Colorado River it's a chain of lakes, starting with Lake Powell, then in Lake Mead, Mojave, Havasu, and then Martinez, or the lower river. And and that next year I won like at least one event on every one of those lakes, and won like the One Bass Angler of the Year, won the One Bass Championship on Powell, and then I won tournaments on Roosevelt and other lakes around the area, and yeah, it was crazy. I don't remember the exact dates or the sequence of all that, but I remember winning a tournament. I wrote about that in my book. When I wrote that book about it, I went back through and I chronicalized the whole thing, and it was pretty amazing to be able to do that. I mean,
yeah.
And you're fishing against guys that have been on those lakes, Folkstad and Iovino and Chuck English and Larry Hopper. All those guys have been working that stuff. John Bedwell, they've been fishing tournaments there for 10, 15 years, and here I come. Yeah, all those guys. I come down out of Dave Noller, and there's a D. Thomas and just a bunch of Bobby Garland fished. I remember all those great names from out west. It was fun. Fred Ward, another one, and they were all there, all those guys. And anyway, that was pretty fun. That kind of jump started me, and then I was ready to go fish the national tour. I figured at that time, after having that kind of success. And I always tell kids, they ask me about how to get started in tournament fishing. I say, well, fish locally in your home state, fish team tournaments, and be successful at that level, and then fish regionally, you know, in a 2 or 3, 4 state area around you. Fish regionally. Today you could do that fish in the Rayovacs or the Opens or whatever, and BFLs, and then if you're successful regionally, then it's reasonable to assume you can be successful on the national level. So that's the approach I took. And so after being having that kind of good success on the regional level, I went back and started fishing the Bass Trail. And let's see, my first bass tournament was at Lake Mead when they came out there in '89, April of '89. And then I started the next tour the next year. The fall of '89 and the spring of '90 was when my first complete season. That's when I drew Larry at the Harris Chain in like February of 1990. But it was awesome. I remember driving back east. I took a whipping the first year fishing back east. My first tournament, I drove from Phoenix to Clayton, New York for the first tournament in September on Thousand Islands. Good
Wow.
night, what a drive. 45 hours one way, and I bombed out and I had to drive 45 hours home. And after that, I decided I'm moving to Texas. I'm not doing this again. This is crazy. And and then that fall, and Jill and I moved to Texas in 1990, and then started fishing the Bass Trail and regularly. That was and I didn't make the Classic my first year, but then I made it for like 16 years after that. Like starting in 1991, the Baltimore, Maryland Classic on the Chesapeake that Ken Cook won. That was my first Classic, and then rode it all the way through 2006. The one that Luke Clausen won down there at Lake Toho. That was my last Classic, and then been fishing FLW since then. But yeah, that was fun.
Cool.
Good memories.